There is a crow in your neighborhood right now. It is sitting on a wire. It is watching you. And what you don't know is that it has already decided what you are. Most people assume birds forget us the moment we walk away. The research disagrees. A crow can carry your face inside its nervous system for years, and if you ever crossed it, it has told the others. Welcome to WildMind. Today we go inside the avian brain to find out exactly how crows remember faces, how they pass that memory to their children, and why one bad encounter can mark you for a lifetime. Stay until point 5. That is the one most people find hardest to believe. Start with the question every wildlife biologist gets asked. Can a crow really tell one human face from another? For decades, the answer was assumed to be no. A bird, the thinking went, sees a coat, a hat, a shape, not a person. Then a biologist at the University of Washington decided to test it. His name is John Marzluff, and the experiment he designed was so simple it became famous. Marzluff and his team wore rubber masks, 2 faces, one a caveman, one a Dick Cheney mask. Both ordinary, both human enough. They wore one mask, the caveman, while they captured and banded 7 crows. Just the standard work of an ornithologist. The crows were released unharmed, and then they waited. Days passed. Weeks. The team returned to the same site, this time wearing the neutral mask. Nothing. The crows ignored them. Then they put the caveman mask back on, and the forest erupted. Crows came out of the trees, diving, screaming. 47 of them in some trials, mobbing the caveman across the entire campus. The neutral face standing beside him received no reaction at all. The crows had not learned to fear a costume. They had learned to recognize the face of a specific human who had once threatened one of their own. The study, titled Lasting Recognition of Threatening People by Wild American Crows, was published in the journal Animal Behavior in 2010. The documented memory at that point, at least 2.7 years. Follow-up observations have pushed that number much further, but the principle was already established. Crows do not see humans as a category. They see individuals, and they remember what those individuals did. That alone would be remarkable. But what Marzluff's team discovered next was something nobody expected. When the team returned years later, the mobbing was bigger. Not smaller, bigger. Crows that had never been captured. Crows that had never seen the caveman before in their lives. They were attacking anyway. The information had spread, from the 7 original birds, to the rest of the flock, and then to the next generation. In 2011, Heather Cornell, John Marzluff, and Shannon Pecoraro published a follow-up paper in Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Its title, Social Learning Spreads Knowledge About Dangerous Humans Among American Crows. 2 mechanisms were identified. Horizontal transmission, adult crows watching another adult mob a dangerous face, and vertical transmission, parent crows teaching their fledglings directly. The young crows, who had never personally encountered the dangerous mask, began scolding it on sight. They had inherited the grudge. Researchers estimate that this kind of social learning can spread information about a single human face across several kilometers in a single generation. Several kilometers from one bad afternoon. Think about what that means. Your face, if a crow decides you are dangerous, can become known to birds you will never meet, in a neighborhood you have never visited. And once that has happened, it does not go away. Which raises the obvious question. If crows can recognize the people who hurt them, can they also recognize the people who help them? The answer turned up in a quiet Seattle suburb, in a story that began by accident. In 2011, a 4-year-old girl named Gabi Mann began dropping food on her way to school. Pieces of chicken nugget, a crust of bread. She did not mean to. She was simply careless, as small children are. But the crows of her neighborhood, began to notice. They began following her route, sitting on wires above her path, watching for her every morning. By the time Gabi was 8, the relationship was deliberate. She set out peanuts and dog food in the backyard birdbath every day. And the crows began bringing her things back. An earring, a polished pebble, a piece of broken glass smoothed by weather, a paperclip, a tiny brass hinge, a pearl-colored heart-shaped bead. Her mother began documenting the collection. The local news picked it up. Then the BBC. What makes the Gabi Mann story scientifically interesting is not the gifts themselves. It is the selectivity. The crows do not leave debris. They leave small, shiny, hand-sized objects. The kind of objects a human child might consider treasure. And the most striking gift, the one Gabi keeps separate from the others, is a lens cap from her mother's camera, which her mother had lost weeks earlier in an alleyway down the street. The crow had carried it, held onto it, and eventually returned it to the person who fed its family. Scientists are careful not to overstate this. A crow does not have a human concept of gratitude. But something is happening in the corvid brain that maps very closely. The recognition of a reliable benefactor, the drive to maintain the relationship, the willingness to invest energy in keeping it alive. Crows learn who is dangerous, and crows learn who is kind, and they tell the others both kinds of story. But there is one form of crow communication that has unsettled even the researchers who study it most closely. It happens in silence. It happens when one of their own has died. In 2015, a graduate student at the University of Washington named Kaeli Swift published a paper, again with John Marzluff. The journal, Animal Behavior. The title, Wild American Crows Gather Around Their Dead to Learn About Danger. What Swift documented was this. When an American crow dies in the open, other crows do not avoid the body. They do the opposite. They come to it, quietly, in numbers. They perch in a ring. They call to one another. They look, for minutes, sometimes longer, and then, just as quietly, they leave. Swift wanted to know what they were doing, so she ran an experiment. She placed a taxidermied crow at a feeding site, and she stood beside it, wearing a mask, and she watched. The local crows arrived. They mobbed her, they scolded the mask, and after the encounter ended, they avoided that feeding site, not for a day, for weeks. The gathering, Swift concluded, is not grief in the way humans grieve. It is data collection. Where did this crow die? What was nearby? What did the killer look like? The whole flock learns. The whole flock remembers. And yet, watch the footage Swift recorded, the silence in those gatherings, the slow, careful approach of each new arrival, the way the birds stay until something invisible has been completed. It does not look like a database being updated. It looks like a wake. Survival and ceremony, in animals as intelligent as crows, may not be different things. They may be the same thing, wearing different feathers. Which brings us to the question that this entire video has been circling. How is any of this possible? Inside a brain the size of a walnut. For most of the 20th century, scientists assumed bird brains were simple, small, limited. The phrase bird-brained meant exactly what it sounds like. Then in 2016, a team led by Surin Olkowicz published a paper in PNAS, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The title, Birds Have Primate-like Numbers of Neurons in the Forebrain. What they found rewrote the textbooks. Songbirds and parrots have, on average, twice as many neurons in their forebrains as mammals of equivalent brain mass. Corvids, the family that includes crows, are at the top of the chart. A crow brain weighs about 15 grams. A capuchin monkey brain weighs around 80. And yet the crow has roughly the same number of forebrain neurons. Packed tighter, wired denser, doing more work per cubic millimeter. This is the neural architecture that lets a crow recognize you from a wire 15 meters away. It is also why corvids show capacities we used to reserve for primates. In 1996, in a Nature paper that startled the field, the biologist Gavin Hunt described New Caledonian crows manufacturing hook tools from twigs to extract grubs, a capability previously associated only with humans and a handful of great apes. Crows, in other words, do not just remember. They reason, they plan, they modify their environment, and their brains. Their dense, primate-grade brains allow all of it. Which leaves us with the question we promised at the start of this video. The one most people find hardest to believe. How long does the memory last? Marzluff's original 2010 paper documented stable recognition at 2.7 years. His team has continued to return to those same sites every year since. The grudges have not faded. Kevin McGowan, an ornithologist at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology who has worked with crows for over 30 years, has reported that individual birds still react to him personally, decades into his work with them. Recognition that appears to persist for much of a crow's adult life. American crows in the wild can live 15 years, sometimes longer, which means a young crow that sees your face today may still recognize it when your own children are nearly grown. And here is where the science becomes something most people find hard to fully process. It is not just that a crow remembers your face. It is that the crow is building a profile of you, specifically. Your face, your walk, The route you take, the time you leave the house, whether you carry food, whether you carry tools, whether you arrived alone or with the other human who was here last week. All of it goes in. All of it is weighed against everything the bird already knows about humans, about its territory, about the seasons of its life. And the next time you walk past, that bird makes a decision. Threat, neutral, friend. The crow that watches you from the fence is not a generic bird. It is an individual, with a name for you, inside its nervous system, that it has been carrying for years. That is not metaphor. That is measurable cognition, documented in peer-reviewed journals, confirmed across 2 decades of fieldwork in Seattle, and quietly happening in every park and alley and backyard, in every city, every day. So the next time a crow looks at you from a wire, take a moment, look back. You may be meeting a stranger, or you may be meeting someone who has been watching your life, quietly, for a very long time. And whether it has decided you are dangerous, or whether it has decided you are kind, it already knows which one you are. If this changed the way you see the birds outside your window, subscribe to WildMind. Every week we go inside one more animal that has been quietly watching us back. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like a crow recognized you? The story of the strangest encounter. I read every one. These are the ones I carry longest.